Imagine you are on this wooden grain ship in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea.
Oh, man, just a terrifying scenario right off the bat.
Right. I mean, it is awful. The hull is literally splintering around you.
Yeah.
The veteran sailors, and we are talking about guys who have spent their entire lives on the water, they are so terrified that they are actively plotting to steal the only lifeboat.
Yeah, they're just ready to abandon everyone else to drown.
Absolutely. And the military commander on board, he has just lost total control of the situation. It is pure chaos. You have not seen the sun or the stars in, I think, over 2 weeks, right? Because the hurricane above you is just that thick.
Yeah, it is complete blackout.
So you are essentially staring at a watery grave. And then, right in the middle of this catastrophic storm, a prisoner stands up. He looks at this completely panicked crew and basically says, "Cheer up."
It is almost comical if it wasn't so serious.
It really is. Anyway, welcome to Reformed Thinking. I'm your host, and today we are getting into a deep dive of a historical text that cuts right to the nerve of how we handle crisis.
It is just a staggering scene. You are describing the Apostle Paul from Acts chapter 27, caught in that infamous Euroclydon wind.
Yeah, the Euroclydon.
Right. So the text we are analyzing today is a sermon by Charles Spurgeon. It is called A Cheery Word in Troublous Times, and he preached it in the late 19th century. Our mission for this deep dive is to dissect Spurgeon's core distinction between having a vague theoretical belief and possessing a really robust operative confidence in God's specific promises.
Right, because those are two very different things.
Oh, absolutely. We want to see how that confidence actually functions when your external world is just completely falling apart.
And the juxtaposition is what gets me here. To find a legitimate source of encouragement, we are not looking at, a serene, quiet meditation room.
No, not at all.
We're looking at a literal shipwreck. Spurgeon uses this chaotic backdrop to point out a fascinating historical reality. He notes that in times of mass panic, it often takes just one person, one heroic spirit to lift the standard and completely shift the momentum of the entire battle.
Yeah, the one-man phenomenon.
Spot on. He takes aim at people who sit around and complain about a one-man ministry, or, the people who just sit around waiting for a committee to save the day.
Spurgeon goes right for the throat on that point. I mean, he argues that God historically uses individual saints standing resolutely to embolden the rest of the community. But here is the psychological mechanism he highlights, and this is so key. You cannot project courage if you do not possess it internally.
Oh, that is so true.
It is physically and spiritually impossible to pour from an empty cup. Paul could project this absolute calm onto a ship full of panicked pagans because his internal reserve of peace was completely independent of the barometric pressure.
Right.
Or the structural integrity of the boat, for that matter.
That makes me think about the safety briefing on a commercial flight.
Oh, yeah, the oxygen masks.
Yeah. They always tell you to secure your own oxygen mask before you try to assist the person next to you. And there is a reason for that, right? If your brain is starved of oxygen, your attempts to help someone else will just add to the chaos.
You become a liability instead of a helper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to secure your own air supply first. But let me push back a bit here, or at least ask for some clarification for the listener. How do we cultivate this internal oxygen supply when the environment is actively hostile? Because we see people all the time faking bravery, right?
Yeah.
Putting on a stoic face, but eventually, under enough pressure, they just snap.
Well, yeah. Faking it might get you through a minor inconvenience. Like, sure, you can fake a smile if your coffee order is wrong.
Right.
But a Category 4 hurricane like the Euroclydon, that strips away any artificial facade. Spurgeon argues that cultivating this internal calm does not come from generating, a positive mental attitude.
No amount of positive thinking is holding that boat together.
Absolutely not. And it doesn't come from trying to suppress your fear through sheer willpower either. That is stoicism, not Christianity. Cultivating calm comes from filling your mind with the objective truth of God's promises so comprehensively that peace is just the inevitable byproduct.
Wow. So the peace isn't forced. It is a byproduct.
Right. When your internal architecture is built on what God has said, that truth just overflows. You naturally become that lifted standard that the timid people rally around.
That is fascinating because panic is a highly contagious social contagion.
Oh, very contagious.
You see one person sprinting toward an exit and suddenly 100 people are running. Yeah. And half of them have no idea what they're even running from.
Yeah, they're just reacting to the reaction.
But what we see with Paul is that peace is also contagious. A non-anxious presence actually alters the chemistry of the room. It makes me wonder about our modern communities. Like, what happens when an entire congregation or an entire family just sits around waiting for someone else to be the brave one?
You end up with collective paralysis.
Right.
Everyone is looking left and right, waiting for a leader to emerge. And meanwhile, the ship is actively taking on water. Spurgeon wants to cure that paralysis. He is calling for the individual listener to stop waiting for the crowd and to assume the responsibility of being the standard bearer.
Someone has to stand up first.
Exactly. Or, well, absolutely. The courage of one individual, when it is anchored in truth, breaks the spell of mass panic. But as you noted with the oxygen mask analogy, Paul's internal supply was not just blind optimism.
No, it wasn't just everything happens for a reason.
Right. It was a highly specific type of reliance, which brings us to Spurgeon's crucial distinction regarding the nature of belief.
This is the turning point of the whole text for me. Spurgeon zeroes in on Paul's specific phrasing. Paul stands on the deck and he says, "I believe God."
He doesn't say, "I believe in God."
Right. And Spurgeon argues this is a vastly different concept. It means trusting his truthfulness, his specific word, even when every single earthly metric screams the opposite.
The context of Acts 27 highlights this distinction brilliantly. Just look at Paul's utter lack of earthly options here.
He had nothing.
Nothing. He could not trust the seasoned sailors. Like you mentioned, they were quietly lowering the skiff, getting ready to abandon the passengers.
Such a cowardly move.
Yeah. He couldn't trust the Roman centurion, who had completely lost command of the situation, and he certainly couldn't trust the ship itself. I mean, the sailors had already resorted to frapping the ship.
Frapping. Explain that for a second.
So frapping is when they pass these massive ropes under the hull and winch them tight just to keep the wood from literally splitting apart under the pressure of the waves.
Oh, wow. So the ship is basically being held together by string at this point.
Yeah, it is a desperate measure. Every human support structure, every safety net had failed catastrophically.
It is the total removal of contingency plans.
Yeah.
Spurgeon contrasts Paul's reality with what he calls fair weather faith.
Yeah, we see a lot of that.
We really do. That is the kind of belief that flourishes when the water is like glass. You know, when your bank account is full, your health is flawless, and you can practically see your own reflection in your calm circumstances.
It is easy to say you trust God when everything is going your way.
Right. But Paul's faith functions in the dark. It sings when the storm is at its absolute worst.
Spurgeon draws a really sharp line between this robust faith and the prevailing skepticism of his own era. And he uses some pretty harsh language here, actually.
He doesn't hold back.
He calls skeptics headstrong and likens them to the Thomas sort, whose obstinacy is actually a symptom of weakness, not intellect.
Interesting.
Yeah, he argues that when someone abandons faith for more, let's say, liberal or fashionable views, they lose the bone and sinew of their soul. They lose their structural integrity. They might write highly educated, fluent nonsense, but they have zero substance to lean on when a real storm hits.
Wait, I have to challenge this logic for a second. Spurgeon is calling skeptics weak and obstinate. But in our modern context, doubt is often framed as a hallmark of intellectual honesty.
It is celebrated.
Yeah, deconstruction is treated almost like a high-status aesthetic. If you sit in a coffee shop and question the historical tenets of the faith, you are considered thoughtful, nuanced. If we just blindly take God at his word without asking questions, aren't we just advocating for anti-intellectualism? How does Spurgeon differentiate between a healthy desire for truth and this Thomas sort of weakness?
That is a very critical question. Look, Spurgeon is not attacking the sincere pursuit of truth. He is not attacking the asking of hard questions.
Okay.
He is attacking the posture of obstinacy. The Thomas sort of skepticism he targets is the attitude that says, unless I see it on my terms, unless God meets my specific empirical demands, I will refuse to believe.
Wow.
It is a demand for autonomy disguised as intellectual inquiry.
So it is the sovereignty issue.
Precisely. It is the creature demanding that the creator submit to a peer review.
Wow. A peer review by the creature.
Yeah. And Spurgeon sees this as weakness because it relies entirely on the fragile human intellect. Our culture assumes the cynic, the person who tears everything down, is the smartest person in the room.
Right. The critic always sounds smarter than the builder.
Yes. But Spurgeon insists that despising an opponent or looking down on simple trust as naive is actually a mask for the skeptic's own lack of foundation. True strength requires taking God at his word when the circumstances are terrifying. Obstinacy is a refusal to submit. It is not wisdom.
That makes a lot of sense. The cynical aesthetic looks great on paper, but it offers zero buoyancy during a shipwreck.
That is a great way to put it. Zero buoyancy.
Cynicism gives you nothing to hold on to when the hull actually splinters. So having established what this unyielding internal belief looks like, this grip on the promises of God, we need to look at how this belief manifests externally.
Right, because it cannot stay internal.
No. Spurgeon makes it clear that true faith cannot remain a private, hidden reality, even when speaking up feels highly risky.
He goes on the offensive here. He attacks believers who hide their confidence under the guise of prudence.
Prudence is such a safe word to hide behind.
It really is. He notes that people often swallow their words because they fear embarrassment. They think, if I publicly declare that God will sustain me and then things go wrong, I will look like an absolute fool.
So they keep their mouths shut, just trying to play it safe.
Yeah, they hedge their bets.
Spurgeon exposes this silence with a really piercing critique. He whispers, "You do not believe at all."
Ouch.
Yeah, he strips away the excuse of prudence and labels it unbelieving selfishness. Genuine faith throws down the gauntlet. It refuses to let the devil make faith dumb. He argues that when believers refuse to openly state their trust in his promises, they are actively robbing God of his honor.
And think about the psychology behind that fear. Why are we so terrified of being embarrassed on behalf of the sovereign creator of the universe?
It's completely absurd when you put it like that. I liken it to refusing to publicly endorse a master builder's work because you are secretly worried a brick might fall out of place.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you are completely ignoring the builder's flawless historical track record. We act like God's public relations team, terrified that he might ruin his own brand if we speak too boldly.
We constantly try to manage his reputation, which is just the height of human arrogance.
It really is.
Spurgeon flatly rejects the idea of taking risks with God. He scoffs at the very phrase. He says, risks about God's keeping his word, it cannot be.
I love that confidence.
He declares that the earth could return to absolute chaos, but the Most High cannot break his word. Letting God defend his own reputation is incredibly liberating. The believer is called to testify to the truth of the promise, not to guarantee the outcome through human effort.
Right. We just testify we don't have to control the variables.
Absolutely.
So once someone drops that mask of prudent silence and decides to speak out, the next logical question is, who needs to hear it? Spurgeon moves from the general call for courage to identifying specific groups of people who desperately need this cheery word.
He categorizes the recipients carefully. First, he identifies seeking souls who are mourning their sin. Second, he addresses the little faiths who are struggling with inward corruption and outward temptations.
For that first group, the seekers mourning their sin, Spurgeon shares a highly counterintuitive anecdote from a divine named Gotthold.
Yeah, this is a brilliant story.
It really is. Gotthold visits a man who is weeping bitterly over his transgressions. Now, modern instincts would say to rush in and tell the man, "Oh, you're fine, don't be so hard on yourself."
Right, offer immediate superficial comfort.
But instead, Gotthold smiles and says, "Thy sadness is my gladness."
Which sounds so harsh to modern ears.
It does. But he recognizes that this mourning is the necessary prerequisite for pardon. The pain is functional.
It is the realization of total depravity meeting the hope of the gospel. You cannot appreciate the cure if you do not understand the lethality of the disease.
That is spot on. But then Spurgeon shifts to the second group, the little fakes, dealing with inward sin. And he uses this brilliant visceral visualization of the old viper of corruption.
Oh, the viper analogy is so good.
I cannot stop thinking about this analogy. He describes inward sin like a venomous snake that has been crushed under a heavy steel-toed boot. The head is crushed. The defeat is an absolute secured reality. But the body of the snake is still thrashing violently.
Yeah, it is a gruesome image, but so accurate.
It looks terrifying. To a new believer who expected immediate perfect peace upon conversion, that thrashing causes intense distress. They see lusts, pride, and corruptions moving within their hearts, and they assume the snake is still fully alive and lethal.
That thrashing is the exact mechanism of indwelling sin that Westminster theology addresses so carefully. The believer is justified, the penalty is paid, but the process of sanctification involves dealing with the thrashing body of that dying viper.
It is an ongoing battle.
Right. And Spurgeon mentions a man named Mr. Verdon, whom he calls a soul hunter.
A soul hunter, what a title.
Yeah. Mr. Verdon did not wait for people to come to him. He actively sought out the hurting, the ones sitting quietly in the back row, overwhelmed by the thrashing of their own sinful nature. We have to learn how to identify the Miss Much Afraids and Mr. Despondencies in our own social circles.
Let's bring this into a modern context for a second, like a corporate workplace or a highly critical family dynamic. Young believers are constantly tempted or mocked for their convictions.
Oh, all the time.
When they struggle, giving them a sterile lecture on moral perfection does absolutely nothing. What they actually need is a soul hunter who pulls them aside and says, look, I feel the exact same struggles. I see the snake thrashing in my own heart too, but God sustains me.
Yeah, that shared reality of struggle, coupled with the shared reliance on the promise, offers a real lifeline.
It changes everything.
The testimony of a fellow struggler takes theology out of the abstract realm and grounds it in reality. It validates their experience while pointing them to the anchor. But, Spurgeon knows that internal temptation is only half the battle. He pivots from the internal struggles of the little faiths to address those enduring severe, unyielding external afflictions.
He speaks of the greatly tried, and he shares this story. He recounts visiting a lady in his congregation who has suffered from severe rheumatism for 22 years.
22 years. Just think about that.
Her hands were physically deformed by the agony, and he describes her life as a sermon upon patience.
Wow.
In the same breath, he addresses young people who are tested by lucrative career opportunities that require them to abandon the Sabbath or compromise their convictions.
The counsel he offers to the tested youth is resolute and uncompromising. He actually quotes Christ directly. What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul?
That puts it in perspective pretty quickly.
It does. Spurgeon warns against the practice of temporizing.
Temporizing. Let's unpack that word.
So temporizing is the habit of compromising just a little bit to make things easier in the short term. It is yielding an inch here and an inch there to avoid friction.
Just going with the flow.
Right. He argues that this habit leads to a miserable existence. You end up running from pillar to post your entire life, never experiencing the joy of a clear conscience.
I think this challenges the modern prosperity-driven mindset that subtly infects a lot of our thinking.
Yeah.
We assume that if we do the right thing, God will reward us with immediate earthly success.
Yeah, the health and wealth gospel.
Right. But doing the right thing often leads to a significantly harder path. Temporizing is like, it is like adjusting a compass by just 1 single degree to avoid walking over a steep, rocky ridge.
Oh, that is a good analogy.
Initially, the new path feels much smoother. You think you made a wise, pragmatic choice. But over a distance of 100 miles, that 1 degree deviation guarantees you will miss your destination by a massive margin.
The compass analogy is precise. The initial compromise seems harmless, perhaps even prudent to the watching world, but the trajectory is spiritually fatal. And when you contrast that young professional's temptation with the lady suffering from rheumatism, the picture becomes incredibly sharp. Her endurance of chronic physical agony without giving way to bitterness offers a testimony that just shatters any concept of a superficial, fair-weather religion.
22 years of constant pain.
Right.
I mean, modern medicine gives us so many ways to manage pain, but in Victorian London, she was largely left to just endure it.
Without any real relief.
Right. For her to maintain a cheery word in that furnace validates the reality of her hope in a way a healthy, wealthy person simply cannot. Spurgeon says, when you weigh the worth of a clear conscience against the mines of California, the clear conscience wins every time.
Because the clear conscience is the only thing you take with you.
Absolutely.
Now, having addressed the individual furnaces of physical pain and career temptation, Spurgeon expands his scope outward. He moves from individual trials to the existential threats facing the church and society at large.
This is where the text feels like it was written yesterday. Spurgeon addresses those who were trembling for the future of the church. People in his day were terrified.
They really were.
They feared that all the great Orthodox leaders were dying out. They were anxious about the rise of unbridled democracy, the spread of atheism, and political radicalism.
Right.
A man actually approaches Spurgeon and tells him he expects the streets of London to run with blood.
To understand the weight of this, you have to remember the context of the late 19th century. Spurgeon was fighting the downgrade controversy, basically watching theological liberalism sweep through the institutions.
Yeah, the anxiety was
And
everywhere.
the fear was palpable. But Spurgeon identifies this panic as the sin of Uzzah.
Okay, let's bring to mind the biblical account of Uzzah for the listener.
Sure.
They are moving the Ark of the Covenant on a cart. The oxen stumble, the cart shakes, and Uzzah puts his hand out to steady the ark.
Right.
He acts as if the sovereign God needs a human hand to keep his holiness from falling in the mud, and God strikes him down for his irreverence.
Yeah. Uzzah assumes God is dependent on human stability. Spurgeon's response to the panicked man predicting bloodshed in London is wonderfully blunt. He just says, God is not dead.
I love that.
So simple. The church does not require our anxiety to survive. He cites the Duke of Wellington at the Battle of Waterloo. Wellington watched the French artillery decimating his lines and just calmly said, "Hard-pounding gentlemen, we will see which will pound the longest."
Wow. We suffer from a severe lack of historical perspective today. We look at our current cultural moment, the political polarization, the hostility toward Orthodox faith, and we think we are facing a uniquely dangerous threat.
We think we are the first to deal with this.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely. We completely forget that the gospel has survived the Roman Empire, the bubonic plague, the Enlightenment, and massive state-sponsored persecution.
We assume our generation is the hinge of history. It is a form of chronological snobbery mixed with severe anxiety.
I want to introduce an analogy here to capture what Spurgeon is saying. The church is an anvil that has worn out countless hammers.
Oh, that is a great image.
Every generation produces a new philosophical or political hammer that strikes the anvil, claiming it will be the one to finally shatter it. But the hammer always breaks. Why do we constantly panic over the newest hammer, completely forgetting the indestructible nature of the anvil?
I agree entirely with that image. And to build on your anvil analogy, Uzzah putting his hand on the ark is like someone throwing their soft, fragile body over the anvil to protect it from the hammer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It is absurd. The anvil does not need your flesh to protect it. It is made of solid iron. Spurgeon brings up a Spartan analogy to illustrate this unbroken continuity.
I really like this part of the sermon.
It is very striking. He says the old men advance in the parade and say, "We have been brave," showing their battle scars. Then the strong men in their prime say, "We are brave," bearing their arms for war. And finally, the youth step up and say, "We will be brave."
That continuity destroys the narrative of despair. It brings to mind the Methodist woman Spurgeon mentions. A preacher is in the pulpit lamenting the death of a great leader, claiming that with his passing, there is no one left to carry on the work.
Yeah, totally giving into despair.
And this woman yells out from the aisle, "Glory be to God, that's a lie."
I love her.
I know, right? It is sheer arrogance to assume God's work is entirely dependent on one specific human generation.
She understood providence better than the man in the pulpit. The work relies entirely on the master builder, not the temporary tools he uses.
Right.
This supreme confidence in God's sovereign preservation leads directly into Spurgeon's final, highly personal defense of his own ministry and his absolute refusal to soften his doctrine.
Spurgeon offers a word to laborers who feel like they are seeing zero fruit from their work. He points out that God's word operates like raindrops and snowflakes.
Yeah, I like that imagery.
They fall from the sky and do not return to heaven without watering the earth and accomplishing their purpose. Then he gets autobiographical, which is rare. He shares his testimony of being baptized as a young lad, going completely against the grain of his peers and family traditions.
He had to stand alone early on.
Yeah, and that early act of defiance set a trajectory of absolute refusal to soften his preaching.
He highlights his unapologetic stance on teaching Calvinism, explicitly noting that it was at a discount in popular opinion. It was not the trendy thing to teach.
Right.
He mocks the idol of his day, which he brilliantly names the great goddess Diana of unsectarianism.
The great goddess Diana of unsectarianism. That is quite a phrase.
It really is. He refuses to preach messages that are velvety and treacly.
Velvety and treacly, meaning sweet, smooth, and lacking any theological edge.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. He warns his listeners against being molluscous.
Molluscus, like a mollusk.
Right. A mollusk is an invertebrate. It has no spine. He is calling out spineless professors of religion who constantly shape their creed to match the opinions of the last person they spoke with.
He mentions Mr. Slapdash, referring to the eccentric, bold preacher Rowland Hill. But I have to ask you, where is the line between being boldly truthful and just being obnoxious?
That is a very fair question.
Because we see people today who claim they are contending for the faith, but they are really just using theology as a weapon to be cruel.
Yeah, they use it as a club.
I would suggest that being a vertebrate, having a backbone, does not mean taking your bones out and hitting people with them.
Oh, that is a fantastic way to put it.
It means standing upright in a hurricane where the spineless get washed away.
That is an excellent distinction. Boldness is never a license for cruelty or arrogance. True conviction is the capacity to withstand immense cultural pressure without bending your core beliefs. Today, the pressure to be unsectarian is overwhelming. We are pressured to be universally pleasing, to smooth out all the rough, offensive edges of the gospel so we fit neatly into polite society.
We want to be liked by everyone.
Right. But Spurgeon gives highly specific instruction to the youth. He says, begin your life with straightforward, unyielding honesty. If you start by telling the truth, you can keep going without constantly adjusting your sails to catch the shifting winds of public opinion.
It is about establishing a trajectory of integrity from day one so you do not have to spend your entire life managing a fragile public persona.
When we pull all these threads together, a very clear, logical progression emerges from Spurgeon's text.
Let's summarize it.
True courage requires an internal supply of a robust belief. Specifically, believing God's stated promises, not just believing in his existence in a vague way.
Right.
That internal belief must manifest externally. It must be spoken aloud, completely disregarding the fear of embarrassment. That spoken word must then be directed intentionally toward the broken, the mourning, and the severely tested. And finally, that theological spine must be maintained fearlessly, even when society panics over the future or demands a watered-down, velvety message.
Which brings us full circle, right back to where we started. We opened with a storm, a splintering grain ship in the Mediterranean, and a man finding an inexplicable peace in the middle of total chaos.
Yeah, Paul standing on the deck.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week. We spend an enormous amount of our energy trying to arrange our lives, to avoid all controversy, to dodge the shipwrecks, and to bypass the storms.
We crave a smooth ride.
We really do. But if we succeed in creating that perfectly smooth, unsectarian existence, do we actually rob ourselves of the very conditions required to prove that we truly believe God? If the ship never sinks, you never get to see if the life preserver actually floats. Think about that the next time the wind starts howling.